In this series of podcasts, we've been learning about the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution that are called the Bill of Rights. In this final part of the series, we'll look at the last two amendments in the Bill of Rights, the 9th and the 10th Amendments. My name is Dr. Rick Gardner from Columbus State University, and this is a Muskogee County School District podcast, the 9th and 10th Amendments. The 9th and 10th Amendments were written so there might be no misunderstanding about the scope and the limits of the United States Constitution. You see, some were worried that people might take a list of rights as all-inclusive, fearing that if a right were not listed, then maybe it didn't exist. And that would create nearly an impossible problem for the authors of the Constitution. How could they possibly list every human right in their Bill of Rights? For example, the Bill of Rights doesn't say that you have the right to comb your hair, so do you? It doesn't say you have the right to wear blue jeans, so do you? It really doesn't even include the right to breathe. Well, the 9th Amendment was designed to deal with this problem of a potentially infinite list of rights. Here's what James Madison said about the problem. The objection against having a Bill of Rights that by listing particular rights we would overlook those rights which were not placed on the list. It might follow that those rights which were not listed simply didn't exist. Well, Madison agreed that this was a legitimate concern, but he felt that the 9th Amendment was sufficient to address the concern. Here's the words of the 9th Amendment. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So if someone were to say to you, "What gives you the right to smile?" There's nothing in the Constitution that says you have the right to smile. You might say, "Oh yes, there is. It's the 9th Amendment. It acknowledges all natural human rights, such as the right to smile." It's really pretty simple. Don't think that if a right isn't listed in the Bill of Rights, that it therefore doesn't exist. The list wasn't intended to be all-inclusive, and that's the point of the 9th Amendment. Now, the last amendment in the Bill of Rights is the 10th. This amendment is somewhat like the 9th. It was meant to make the scope of the Constitution more clear. But this amendment is one that many people have argued about, even gone to war over, since it was first adopted in 1791. Now, the point of the 10th Amendment is to clarify the extent of the federal government's authority versus the extent of each state government's authority. Basically, what the 10th Amendment says is that the federal government's authority is limited to what the Constitution says and nothing more. Furthermore, the 10th Amendment says that any power not clearly given to the federal government by the Constitution is automatically in the hands of the state governments or the citizens as individual persons. Here are the words of the 10th Amendment. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. All right. So let's take speed limits, for example. Nothing in the Constitution gives the federal government jurisdiction over speed limits on state roads and highways. Therefore, according to the 10th Amendment, each state government is automatically endowed with the authority to determine speed limits within its borders. Now, take international treaties, on the other hand. The U.S. Constitution does, in fact, explicitly give the federal government authority over international treaties. And therefore, the states must yield to the federal government in that regard, and states cannot exercise that power. Well, what about how hair shall be combed? Well, it's not in the U.S. Constitution. Therefore, it's in the hands of a state government or in the hands of the citizens. Well, since there aren't any states, at least that I know of, that regulate the way that hair is combed, that authority falls into the hands of the people, the citizens, just as the 10th Amendment says. This division of power between the state and the national government is a principle known as federalism. The original idea of the founders was that state governments would have the largest amount of authority in this new nation, and that the federal government's power would be rather small and limited. That idea, however, was challenged in the middle of the 19th century as a result of the issue of slavery. The southern states were very quick to claim the 10th Amendment as a clear indication that the federal government had no right to regulate slavery, that to do so was a state's right. Northerners like Abraham Lincoln felt that the federal government could and should prohibit slavery in any state yet unformed. The argument over the meaning of the 10th Amendment led to the most bloody war in American history, the Civil War. And when the war ended, 3 more amendments would be passed that clearly prohibited slavery in every state. And those new amendments had the effect of minimizing the meaning of the 10th Amendment. Now, this is a sticky issue still argued by politicians and political scientists today. How much power does the 10th Amendment actually give to state governments? Well, we can say this. Since the time of the Civil War, those powers have been steadily decreasing. Is that a good or a bad direction for our country to go? Well, that's another one of those difficult questions that our study of the Bill of Rights poses. So that's our 9th and 10th Amendments. The 9th Amendment reminds us not to make the mistake of thinking that if a right is not in the list, it doesn't necessarily exist. And the 10th Amendment says that any power not given to the federal government by the words of the Constitution is automatically in the hands of the state governments or the individual citizens. My name is Dr. Rick Gardner from Columbus State University. This has been another Muskogee County School District podcast, the 9th and the 10th Amendments.